100 behind all the way.
I was watching it too. As a matter of fact, I still got it up here on my
Yeah.
election night results, the election
All
election
right. Well,
Canada thing there.
welcome everybody to Talking Niagara. And the first thing we're going to jump to this morning, Dave and I are going to jump to this morning, is the election result at Toronto St. Paul's by-election.
This is a major. This is a
Yeah.
big deal. But
Basically,
I would just like to say before that congratulations to the Florida Panthers for winning a nail biter of a hockey game last night. I was watching it, enjoying it perfectly when my connection died and I couldn't find it anymore. So I got to see about all the first period and about 2 minutes of the second period. But
I wasn't watching it at all. I wasn't watching it at all, but anybody who knows me knows I'm not a hockey fan.
I love hockey, but I don't watch it very often. I love to play it, but I don't watch it very often, except in the playoffs. I will go see a lacrosse game.
It was good to see that a Canadian team went to Game 7.
Yeah, but that's misleading in a way. I remember years ago when I think it was LA was in the final. I think they won that year. And there were more Canadians on the Los Angeles team than there were on the Canadian teams that played them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a kind of irony, isn't it? You know. Okay.
Yeah, it's just symbolic.
Yeah.
But Lord Stanley gave the cup to Canada, and somehow the NHL got their mitts on it, and it's illegal, man. They weren't supposed to do that. That's supposed to be for amateur hockey. I mean, if you look at the first winners of it, you know, like the Kenora Thistles or something like that are on it, and I mean, one of the Stanley Cup games happened between Dawson City and I don't know, Vancouver or something, I don't know, or Ottawa. So it was supposed to be when Lord Stanley gave the cup, it was supposed to be for amateur hockey. However, somehow it's made its way into the professional. And it shouldn't be going into the States no matter what. I mean, we should have a wall up so that cup can't go down there. We can give them a replica, but they can't have the real thing.
Well, one of the things that was said about this, I heard somebody say, well, it's about time. Maybe what we need to do with hockey, particularly with the woes of Toronto, is to introduce one of the things that they have in soccer in Europe. The term is relegation. Finish bottom of the league, and you could get relegated.
Oh, relegated to a lesser team,
to a lower division, and basically
that'll never work here. That'll never work here.
I know. The thing is that's the whole thing. Is it doesn't operate that way because you'd actually have to get. You know, it's the same with baseball, for example. All the major league teams have got their minor league affiliates, right?
Yeah, it works different here, and believe me, people won't go if it's not a major league. If you say that you took Buffalo and then put them down into the American League from the National League down to the American League, then less people will go because the big stars that are in the NHL won't show up there anymore. You only get American League players. So that in marketing it's a disaster. It's different in Britain though, because everybody knows and loves soccer there. Everybody knows it, loves it, and expects that sort of thing to happen, that their team can move their way up or down.
The problem lies is when you get a team that's relegated, they're fighting for example, they're relegated out the Premiership. Well, there was one team this year was relegated with less than 20 points, which is really abysmal showing. They probably shouldn't have been in the Premiership in the first place. But when you get a team that's relegated, what happens is they basically are fighting. especially if they're third from bottom, they're fighting tooth and nail to become for safety to become fourth from bottom.
Yes,
there's many a
it's an
team.
entirely different system.
Yeah, there's many a team that have earned safety on the last game of the season. So the bottom end of the league is as important as the top end of the league.
Yes. So there you have it.
Yeah.
The Panthers won, and it looked for a while there that the one and only time that a team has fought back from a three game deficit and won was the 1942 Toronto Maple Leafs. They tried it again 2 years later against Detroit, but Detroit beat them that time. It's only happened once that a team that in the final that a team has come back from a 3-game deficit and in the final and won, and that was the Toronto Maple Leafs 1942. The coming back from a 3-game deficit in other parts of the playoffs, not the finals, has only happened 4 times altogether.
Yeah.
Good morning, Randy West.
It's hard, actually. It really is hard for anybody who's in any of the leagues in the playoff in any of the situations where there's multi-game playoffs. It's hard to come back from from essentially 3-0 down or even 3-1 down.
It hasn't happened in professional baseball either. Maybe only 1 or 2 times.
Yeah, it's happened 1 or 2 times. That's it. I couldn't tell you that in baseball it's happened 1 or 2 times. I researched it a while back. I don't remember the teams that were involved.
Yeah, so it's a very rare thing.
Yeah.
Game 7s are rare anyway. There's only been 8. I think this is the 18th Game 7 in NHL history. 18th out of all those years.
Yeah.
And only once, 82 years ago, that Toronto Maple Leafs actually were able to overcome a 3-game deficit and actually win the cup. They tried the same thing a couple of years later, but this time Detroit was ready for them. Back then, Detroit was a powerhouse in the 40s and 50s.
All right.
Anyway, so that's a big congratulations to Florida Panthers. It is going to be their first cup, and I have to say that I have a little bit of cynicism here. I thought to myself, who's going to win this game? And then I thought, what would be better for the NHL? To have a northern team way up in Canada win the cup or somebody down in Florida win it? Well, I thought for the NHL, it would be better for Florida win. So they're going to make sure that, they're going to put the fix in. So I said to myself tongue in cheek, basically. And that's why I picked the Florida Panthers to win. Using that form of cynicism, and of course, there is no evidence of that at all. But I just did that to be cynical. Yeah.
Okay. So the Conservatives won St. Paul by-election by 2%, basically 2% of the vote. The Liberal candidate. What's his name?
The Conservatives is Don Stewart, and the Liberal was Leslie
Church. Yes, Leslie Church was in the lead by about 100 to 150, maybe 1.200 for most of the evening until I went to bed, and I thought, well, he's not far enough ahead to guarantee anything, and accordingly, about later in the morning, the last batches of votes tipped to the Conservative direction and gave the Conservatives a 2% majority in that riding, in St. Paul riding. And the interesting thing is that this is the first seat that the Conservatives have picked up in the Toronto area. This is the first seat the party has won in urban Toronto since 2011 federal election.
This is the first time the Liberals have not owned a seat in 30 years.
Yeah.
The Conservatives have not had a contender in Toronto St. Paul. They haven't had a contender there for 40 years. You have to go back to the 1980s before you find a Conservative that had a chance in Toronto St. Paul. So this seat has been held by the Liberals for 30 years. And if anything was ironclad, that was. Now I have to ask the question, is Justin Trudeau going to be in denial of this, which he seems to have been up until now, when members of his party have quietly said, if we're gonna show it all in this next election, you better leave. I predicted that his 9/11 would be around 9/11 this year. And this may push him there. Now, but I think also he has the capability of being in total denial of the facts of the world.
That's an interesting.
He's an impractical, idealistic person. He believes in butterflies and rainbows.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought because the last set of by-elections didn't really turn up anything spectacular. I was actually curious about this one because I thought if the Conservatives were holding on to only 150 to 200, trailing when I went to bed, I'm thinking to myself, certainly they've got a chance the whole way through. There's always a chance they're going to get there.
Well, we can't even find, even Gaza creeped into this too, because in Toronto St. Paul, I think 11% of the population there are Jewish people. And the Conservatives tried that tack that Trudeau has been turning his back on Israel kind of thing. Oddly enough, some of his own party have said that he's been supporting Israel too much. So I don't know. Conservatives have tried to capture that 11% vote. I don't think it would have much of an effect, because when interviewed, the people in the area by different news agencies, or the one I was watching anyway, the people were more worried about the finances than anything else. They said the taxes were too high. They felt that their standard of living was being reduced. They felt that they had a fatigue for the government. They didn't feel that the government was working properly, and all the other things we hear and see. It's usually more about your own dollars and cents than anything in the long run. You may capture a few percentages on ideals in an election, like if you have an area that has a strong green component or a strong NDP opponent, you may capture some of the idealistic votes, or even a strong conservative. But at the bottom line, it doesn't matter who's in power. It's the economy, stupid. Or how did George Bush Sr. say? Is the economy stupid, or something like that? He used to say. They don't use that word stupid anymore in campaigning, but that's what he used to say.
Well, interesting the thing is about this election, right? Okay, so the independent Felix Antoine Hamel got a grand total of 0 votes.
Well, look at the contenders last night. There are a dozen independents.
No,
let me look. The Rhino Party got more votes than most of the independents. The Marxist-Leninist Party just beat out the Rhino Party by 6 votes.
I was going to say the Marxist-Leninist Party got 57 votes. The Rhino Party got 51 votes, and the 57 votes of the Marxist-Leninist Party is the same as probably the vast majority of all the independents added together.
I've never seen this at all. Like I know there's the odd independent when we go to vote, but there is one single riding. And how many independents are there? There's just got to be 20 of them at least.
No, there was 78 on the ballot.
78.
Yep.
Wow.
78.
There's the marijuana party, the centrist party. So there we have and no affiliation at all by Stephen Davis, and he got 0.1% of the votes.
Yeah, so and the marijuana party, Danny Laguerre, got 29 votes.
Now here's something that the New Democratic Party was supposed to be directing their people to vote for the Liberals because they were worried that the Conservatives were going to win. That didn't really happen too much because the NDP managed to capture nearly 11% of the votes.
Yeah,
which means if that really did happen, if the NDP supporters did vote for the Liberals, then the Liberals would have won. But maybe a large amount of them did because they only got 11% of the vote. And,
I would expect the only way you'd know is comparing it to last time, and I rather suspect that the difference, the move in vote has gone from Liberal to Conservative and not from Liberal. There's not been a swing from Liberal to NDP or even NDP to Liberal at all.
Are we to assume this is a harbinger of things to come?
Yeah, that's a big question, really, at this stage for us. Is that telling what is going to happen? For the rest going on here on out, basically. So Randy West said good morning, as did Karen Fraser, as did Robert DePaul, as did Mike Cushman. And Karen wants a recount for all those votes.
Well, Karen, when you're getting your seniors discount at Zappy's, we'll send the results over there.
What was the turnout? Okay, so what was the turnout of voters? I'm on the Elections Canada site and I don't see that. That's weird, actually.
Yeah, it's way down at the bottom. It let me see. It says voter turnout. Nearly 37,000 of 84.
43%.
43%. Almost 44%. Yeah. 43.5. So you about call it 44%.
Yeah.
It does not include electors who were registered on election day. Okay, so there's a handful that won't. The population of this area, this one thing, is larger than Niagara Falls, and it has a elector rating, electors of 85,000, and
it's got 116,000
showed.
Yeah, it's got 100.
So that's more than a third.
Yeah.
So it's 42%, and I don't know. You would think that a very important race like that, they would have brought out more of their electors, but the ones that did show up had a message to say.
Yeah.
And
Okay, Randy basically Trudeau struts pompously. People are simply tired of him. Yeah, that's true. I think people are getting tired, irrespective of how you may feel. I think people are getting to that point. So 44% turnout is more than normal, but still not acceptable. Our system is broken. Yeah, says Mike. I couldn't agree more, Mike. We have big problems when we're voting for a federal by-election at 46%. 43%, sorry. Because normally by-elections bring out the crazy. Mike Smith says go blue, and what a comeback by the cons. Yeah, absolutely. But by-elections normally bring out, one of the things that I would say with by-elections is that they normally bring out kind of a lot more people in an area than would often vote normally. So you bring out the crazies, so to speak.
Well, maybe. Well, we only had 44% show up in this particular race, and that and the whole and nobody in Toronto, St. Paul would not be aware that this was an earth-shaking important by-election. So the fact that only 44% of them showed up to vote meant that they didn't even really like any of the possibilities. And believe me, they had lots of possibilities, from Marxist Leninists to Rhino Party.
I mean, hail the revolution. We can bring in the Marxist Leninist Party. Yeah.
Is this part of the
counter-revolution?
Let me ask another.
Or hail the counter-revolution. We could have had the Rhino Party, you know?
Well, one of my nicknames is Rhino, man. Maybe I'll start the Rhino Party right down here.
Okay, so moving on. George Bailey, a great record keeper of memorable stories and photos of Niagara Falls, unfortunately died.
Yeah, it was very kind of. This showed up first thing in the morning, so I didn't really have time to read the article too much. I've met George Bailey a few times over the years. I mean,
I bet you have.
He's just about everybody knew the guy. I mean, he was just one of those personalities that was impossible not to know. And he actually he was one of those guys that sold water that came over the falls, Niagara Falls water. He actually had little vials of water, I think, on a necklace, and they sold. And for a while, they sold like hotcakes. I thought he told me about it one time when I don't know, it was some charity thing or something. I forget what it was, and he was sitting at our table. But he knew everybody in town. He basically, so he was a really interesting fellow, and I don't know. I haven't been able to read the article to see how much. Only the fact.
I know he was born in Newfoundland in 1944, and he was 8 years old when he came to Niagara Falls because his father was hired by the Maid of the Mist.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He trained as a draftsman after high school and enrolled at Niagara College in the late 60s, doing a course on advertising and public relations. And at the time, he was working as a reporter for CJRN.
Yes, and that's probably another place where people know him. CJRN, it's hard to think of this now, but that AM station, CJRN, was like ubiquitous in town. People had it on all the time. I didn't like it one bit because I didn't like the music that came out. Of course, I was a young man at the time.
Yeah.
Hey, man, they don't play Zeppelin. Oh, what good is this station? But CGRN was a big deal for the very longest time, and that's another place where George Bailey would have got notoriety.
Yeah. So 1944. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was 80 years old. So I don't know. Anytime I saw him, he looked really healthy. So I don't know what took him so early. Like 80 is not old nowadays. I hope it isn't because I'm 70.
And you're looking on adding a few more years to that mark, yeah?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah.
And basically,
another 20.
So he worked with Niagara Parks, and he said escorted some high-profile visitors, including Princess Diana, Princes William and Harry, and also politicians, including President Carter.
Yeah, he was so he had a bit of a charmed life there. I got to meet some very interesting people. I remember the kid that used to live beside me, he worked on Maid of the Mist. So when the little guys, the little princes, Diana and Charlie and the two young lads,
oh my God, they were
just little, came to Niagara Falls. My neighbor was the guy on the Maid of the Mist that put their life jackets on. The total of them, exactly. This whole thing is like, wow, I love the jackets, by the way, blue and purple. And, the older of them is a future king of England. Yeah. Yeah.
Love the picture.
Yeah. So George Bailey is gone, and it's just another another chapter in Niagara. It's another indication to me that Niagara is changing quite a bit. Niagara is not the town it used to be. Guys like George Bailey, you're not going to find them around anymore. So the character of the town is changing rather quickly. It is not that place that it used to be. So we're going to be just sort of consumed in the Toronto, Hamilton, St. Catharines, one big city thing, I'm afraid. And I think if it wasn't for the falls, the actual falls there, it'd be hard to maintain an identity.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's interesting and sad loss to the community.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I got some comments here. Yeah, okay, that's nothing to do with that. Chris Simone saying hello.
Hello, Chris.
And going back
can you go to Toronto, St. Paul, and help Karen Fraser count those votes?
So Mike Smith, just to flick back to the last thing since you went there as well, just an indication of what's going to happen in the election. Close races will be won by cons. Cons will flip Liberal strongholds. I predict less than 40 Liberal seats in the House. You might well be right.
Well, yeah, the Liberals did get knocked down to almost nothing at one time, and when they did, this Toronto St. Paul was still holding for the Liberals. So that gives you an idea that how important this particular race was.
Yeah.
And how much of an indication is happening. And I would like, and as we were talking about it before, and as I mentioned earlier on, particularly what's happening in Europe now, is this a general shift to the right? Usually North America is a little bit later than Europe, but there seems to be a general shift in the world democracies to the right. I'm not saying it's to the right, like the jackbooted Nazi type right. I'm talking about conservative.
Yeah, I know.
Is there a general shift towards conservative?
You see, for example,
the free world.
But again, for example, the Conservatives have been in power for much of the last 20 years in UK, and they're about to lose, and they're about to get thumped big in the UK. You know, we're talking about a potentially 260 seat majority in the UK Parliament. So that theoretically is going the other way, but I don't know. You know, Labour isn't socialist, right? Labour's kind of, it's not even
like
social
liberals.
democrat. It's kind of not even liberal. It's an oddity, you know. So Labour's, you know, the left side of the political spectrum. So in the UK, that's kind of difficult. You know, it's a different picture, slightly different picture, but that doesn't mean to say that you don't buck trends by one election. Okay.
Well, yeah. So UK is the outlier, but generally speaking, I see this shift, and it's not just in the democracies of the West. It is also like places like Brazil is kind of taking a bounce back from the far right, but there seems to be this trend toward conservatism, and I'm not talking about. Like I hesitate to use the word right, because when we hear the word right, we think of jackbooted nationalists. When we hear about the left, we kind of think of like socialism, communism. But I'd rather go, you know, left and right in the zone of acceptability. You know, that centrist area where you can go a little bit to the right and a little bit to the left. And you can sort of zone in on sort of balanced government.
Yeah, and then of course the other thing to be looking at is that we have an upcoming this weekend. We have an upcoming French election. Also,
Yes, and this could be this was either a work of genius by Macron or an act of desperation. It's probably both. If he wins, if it works the way he hopes it does, he'll come out looking like a genius. But he really didn't have much choice. He had to staunch the flow away from his party because his party showed up dismally in the European Union elections and
yeah,
European Parliament election. His party did terrible, and Marie Le Pen's party did rather well. That tells you something. So he's going to try to jump on it before it starts to flow too much to the right. He hopes that he'll be able to hold it back by putting in an election right now, kind of like Trudeau did back in the 2021 when he had the pandemic elections.
yeah. Well, that's, you see, the first round of the French elections is on Saturday. Yeah, so 4 days, 23 hours till the end, till the election is over in France. And at the moment, Rally National seems to be in the lead.
And that's
Right?
Le Pen's, right?
Yeah, that's Le Pen's. And Randy West says you have to be cautious about Conservative wins. The problem to watch is joining of the NDP backing the Liberals and why, right? Fair point, right? Because
Well, yeah, we haven't had a real coalition government. We have this cooperation government now.
yeah,
They hesitate to call it a coalition, but it's a coalition without calling it a coalition because it's a guarantee that we'll back you up. We're not going to we have a common enemy, and it's called the Conservatives. So you're right. Randy West is right that if the Conservatives win enough to hold a majority, but if you add the Liberals and the Conservative and the NDP together, and they are more than Conservatives, they could very much hold a coalition government.
yeah.
But that would be, but they would have to change their leader. Trudeau would have to change out because he is dynamically unpopular at the moment. So if they did that, they would have to get a different leader, probably the Bank of Canada guy. Was it Carney? I'm not sure.
Yeah, they are prior president of the Bank of Canada.
Yeah, and may have to dump Jagmeet as well. But that is a real popularity. That is a real possibility, but it may incur more of the wrath of Canadians than anything else. So they have to be careful.
Yeah. Okay. And, with that flurry of elections across the world, and by the way, in the UK, it's likely to be the former UK Independence Party who are now under the thing of the UK Reform Party that will come in second place. It will be the official opposition, and they've got 0 seats in Parliament right now. They're predicted to be the official opposition come the next election, come July 4th.
Look, it's of note here. We're talking about the meddling of AIPAC and the Israeli lobby in the U.S. elections right now. They were the ones that nearly destroyed Jeremy Corbyn by putting out a lot of false news and stuff about him. They're the ones that nearly destroyed him. They're the ones that called him an anti-Semite and invented things that looked as if he was him and his party were anti-Semitic, including one of his party members who was a Jewish member who got the label of being anti-Semitic too. So there is that still as a possibility in the UK elections, because right now Israel's looking for friends anywhere, and they're going to be working hard to manipulate whatever they can in the UK election, as well as they are in the US elections right now. Yeah. So that's a factor that we should zoom in on once in a while. I don't know how.
But remember, Corbyn isn't leader of the Corbyn isn't leader of the Labour Party anymore.
No, but I did say that they pretty well destroyed him his last run at it because of these allegations, and they timed them perfectly so they couldn't be disproven in time. And it's I don't know. It's one of
Well,
the greatest manipulations of democracy I've ever seen.
yeah. Okay. All right. So moving along and coming back local, 20% of apartments in a 20-story Niagara Falls building will have monthly rents of well below 2,400. Here's
Oh
my
joy! Oh
prediction.
joy!
Here's my prediction. Yes, well below 2,400 means that the actual rent will be $23.99.
Yes, yes, yes. Like I mean, the counselors all celebrated. Oh yes, this is affordable. It is not affordable.
Yeah.
It is not affordable. It's high end affordable.
At 2,400, that's not affordable.
The high end standard that $90,000 or $93,000 or something is a couple's combined income, right? A somebody in Niagara Falls who makes a good wage for Niagara Falls makes about $63,000. If you make $63,000 per year, you're not going to be able to afford $2,500 a month. And like you said, 23.99 a month. And these are postage stamp type of apartments. Now they have to do it because they're going to the HMC, right? Housing, CMHC for funding. And if you do that, you are required to have X amount of affordable units. But I don't see anything $2,400 and under affordable. Not when you think of the average income of Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
It is not affordable. It is affordable for the high end of the median, perhaps. Maybe that one person that's making 60, that's supposed to be the high end medium. If you go look at the average incomes of Niagara Falls.
Well, we talked about individuals. The average individual wage was in the 34,000 mark.
I think that was for somebody. I think no, that was the very like the low end goes from 48. So if you're looking at the mid zone, the middle class basically zone, right? So it goes from 48 to 63. 54 is the dead middle. 54,000 is the dead middle for an average. The high end of that is 63,000. And if you're charging rents of $2,400, and what is well below? Define well below.
Yeah, exactly. Well below doesn't mean a damn thing. As I said, well below to me is $23.99.
Yeah, this is now I don't know how much it is policed, this CMHC loan or whatever they're getting, that insists that they have to have affordable, and they're going to define affordable as its most highest limit. You can count on that.
Yeah,
there's going to be a zone of affordable, and they're going to say this is affordable for this income group. This is affordable for this income group, and this. They're going to put it at the high end of the average. So the Randy West says the average person works 2,000 hours per year, which means $63K is more than $30 per hour. So $30 an hour nowadays. I was making $40 an hour in 2014.
Yeah, but you were in a union job. You were your wage was protected.
Well, yeah, but I was making it, and other people in this town are making that too. So if you're thinking, and I was a tradesman, I was a millwright. I'm supposed to be in the mid zone. I was making nearly $40 an hour in 2014. If somebody today, 10 years later, is making $30 an hour and it's supposed to be a good wage,
there's something wrong with our society.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Right. Okay, if you consider high wages to those who travel to Toronto for better numbers, you must now consider the travel costs. That's true as well.
Well, I had to
And the
travel all
parking.
over to make my wage. It was either most of the time I was in Nanticoke, either the power station there
Yeah.
or the steel mill that was there. Now, also I spent some time in the refinery that was there as well. But car plants, like I didn't get many car plants here. The close ones, no, I got the ones in Brantford or Oakville or something like that during their shutdowns and that. So I had to travel around a fair amount. And of course, and in those days you didn't get you couldn't use travel on your taxes if they just wouldn't permit it for some reason for tradesmen. I don't know. They would for traveling salesmen, but not for tradesmen.
That's so odd. Okay, City Council has shown their true colours, catering to the rich, and
yeah, it's going to be hard for them not to. They want these developments. They have to get the numbers up. They're going to if they want a piece of the pie from Ontario's incentive to start housing projects. But it's pretty hard to start housing projects when you don't have enough people to build them. And Randy West says Niagara has no mills anymore. Well, what Dave left in 2014 no longer exists. Yeah, well, I didn't work in Niagara Falls, Randy. I worked in Nanticoke. I worked in the steel mills in Nanticoke. I worked in the power plant and refineries in Nanticoke. I worked in Hamilton, Oakville. And very rarely did we get any job close to Niagara Falls at all. Very rare. Sometimes we got some in St. Catharines. I had a fair amount in St. Catharines for some time, but yeah, there are no mills. There is, well, Washington Mills, there's still one or two those. We mentioned that the other day, but you're right. There isn't much manufacturing here anymore. And
Randy West also basically says, yeah, exactly. And you did not get good wages in Niagara, right? You got your good wages outside of Niagara, which took into consideration the travel costs.
That's right. And it was quite a bit of travel costs too. We're always carpooling and all that.
Yeah.
But the wages made up for it. But anyway, Randy West says, I hold 3 provincial licenses and can't get $40 locally now. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Niagara Falls is dead. Well, the Niagara region is dead industrially. That's for sure. A lot of it dragged up. Like one person after another I knew just lost their jobs, one right after another, as places closed up. And that's the case. Like when you get a guy delivering a refrigerator and he happened to be a machinist that worked most of his life as a machinist, supplying the industries around with machine products, and then and then now he has to deliver appliances because there's no jobs left. When you bump into a guy he's delivering pizzas, or another guy you see them with a mop mopping up a church because that's the only job he could get, and he used to work in some of the leading edge factories around, making good wages and all that. So Randy's quite right about that. And so $30 an hour here, I suppose, when you factor all that in, is a top end wage in this town. But we're putting out places for people to stay that are top end wages for some other town, not our town.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the affordable thing of well below 2,400, I'd like to see what that well below 2,400 is.
Yeah. Exactly.
How about a ballpark? How about why didn't any of the councils say, what do you mean by well below? They're going to get some wishy-washy answer. Well, it will depend this or depend that. How
many of them are going to be available at 1,500? That's what I want to know.
Absolutely zero, I bet. And they're going to be postage stamps. They're going to be 500 square feet. You know, you're going to get a modified closet.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you know where I'm coming from by asking how many going to be 1,500.
Yeah,
right? Because that's
exactly.
what a lot of, I get people every day that coming to me that basically what is happening is they're being forced out of their apartment, and their current rent is like 1,200, and
Yes,
everybody around them is paying 3,000 for the same apartment.
it's sickening.
Yeah, yeah,
It's sickening.
yeah,
I mean, I remember a heartbreakable call. I got a call. I don't even know how the person got my number, but they were trying to get into one of our Kiwanis buildings, and it was a very nice woman, very well spoken. You could tell that she was an educated person. She had a certain demeanor, and her elocution was nice and everything. And she wanted to get out of where she was living because it was a harsh area and the rents were going up. So she didn't feel safe in it, and it was getting expensive. And she wanted to get into one of our Kiwanis units.
yeah.
And the story she told, I think, was probably, and this was a couple of years ago, so it's even worse now. You know, there is no place for people to go and live. If they do get a place to fairly good, like we have that Atlantis, the Stanford Manor there on Atlantis. We work with the March of Dimes in there, so because they have a lot of people with wheelchairs in there. You know, we have the one, of course, on Buckley, and we have the senior one on Barker.
Yeah.
But there's not enough. There's not enough. And the city is all happy about putting up something like this, where they're going to have, 20% of them well below 2,400, but they won't divine well below.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So moving away again, North Korea and Russia, this pact will call for immediate military aid if invaded. So I'm assuming that's if North Korea is invaded, they'll get they'll get Russian aid.
This is so dumb. What am I missing here? What am I missing? Ever since the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia has tried to make stronger ties with the West and keeps getting rejected. And what does the West do? It tells Russia around the time when they gave up East Germany, they said, okay, we're not going to expand NATO anymore. And then they did. And then they said to them, oh, sorry, we did that, but we're not going to expand anymore. And they did again. And they just expanded NATO a third time. In 2006, 2007, they said they're going to expand NATO into Ukraine and Georgia. The Russians says, don't do that. We want to be part of NATO, Russia says. We want to be a part of the collection. We want to be westward looking. We want to be part of the thing.
Yeah.
The West keeps pushing them and pushing them.
Well, there was a time
now, what they have done is they have done exactly opposite of what Machiavelli advised anyone to do in a powerful position. If you're the number one power in the world, if there's three powers in the world, the number one power is the United States. The number two power is China. They are roughly equal. But the third power, which is way down the list, is Russia. What Machiavelli says, do you join in with China to eradicate Russia or make it completely, the third power, completely useless? Or do you align with that third power against the other power? And that's what Machiavelli said. I think that's what Trump was trying to do, even though I don't like the guy. I think he had the right idea there. But now what we have done in the West, we have driven Russia and Korea and China all together. You have this big block, basically like a big concrete block of intransigence. And what we have just done to China is we've given them a partner of
Well, one of
infinite
the
resources.
And what you were saying there about Russia being at one time westward looking, there was a time when the European Union was talking about they had just taken in places like Poland, and they were talking about the possibility, not definitely, of having Russia join the European Union. And there were problems with it, with that concept, but it was a concept that was around in the mid late 90s and early 2000s, as a way of bringing Russia on board and allying with the West. Why do you think places like Germany had those pipelines to Russia? Because of those times when they were negotiating stronger ties with Russia at one point. That was where that was happening.
I mean, it's just darn right silly. They blew up the Nord Stream pipeline in the bottom of the what was the Baltic there, and my God, I mean, really, Russia could be controlled. Russia could be controlled by making it dependent on Western economies. If it was dependent on Western economies for its wealth, then you could get it to cooperate. But we didn't. What we did was we kept pushing it and sticking it with a needle.
Yeah.
And finally the bear revolted. And now they got this stupid war going on, a proxy war where the United States is doing the Lend-Lease thing, or the West at all. And what do you think Russia was going to do? Yeah. Really, seriously, what do you think Russia's going to do when they try to box them in and around the Black Sea? I'm serious. Like, who is running the show, and what am I missing? Why do they want to do that? Why? They must have known that Russia had only one more place to go, and that was to China. And not only that, it has pretty good relations with India as well. So you have the two largest population areas. You have the two largest potentials for trade, the two largest populations in the world, China and India, and you are Russia, and you have them locked up, and we push them into their hands. And not only that, but even more seriously, we push them into the hands of we pushed them into an alliance with North Korea. Now, North Korea was a bit of a problem for China, but now that Russia's there, North Korea could feel even more confident that it can start shooting missiles up in the air.
Remember though, what a lot of people forget here is that Russia actually shares a border with North Korea.
Yeah, a little tiny one.
Shares a border.
Yeah, it's a wee one, wee little one. Yeah,
a few hundred miles.
Fact, I think Putin and Kim Jong-un actually met at that border, didn't they?
Yeah, it's only a few hundred miles, and that's where I think they first did meet. Yes.
Yeah. Don't forget, in the later part of the Second World War, the Soviet Army went east, and in the last 6 months of the war, absolutely devastated one Japanese army after another. They knocked out the Manchurians. They knocked out the Japanese armies in Manchuria. They just absolutely destroyed them. The Russians had a lot of trouble with the Germans until they figured it out. But from the very beginning, even before the Second World War happened, the Russians had the Japanese numbers. They gave them an absolute rubbing back in 1939 or 40.
Well, there's Russian, Japanese incursions into the mainland, Manchuria, Korea, or that wasn't called Korea back then, etc., were massive. And they for one time had vast chunks of Korea and China under their rule up until 1945 anyway.
Well, they did. The Chinese nationals and the Chinese communists made a truce between one another so they could concentrate on getting rid of the Japanese. That started. Remember, the Japanese invaded China in 1937, took over Korea and parts of Manchuria, and then started to work their way towards the Russian border. This is before the onslaught of the Nazis on Russia.
Yeah, this is way back in the 20s. This is
no. I'm talking just before the First World War. Remember, the Japanese invaded China in 1937.
They had Korea in their grip in the 1890s.
Well, it was a back and forth thing, but remember that when the Japanese became militaristic in the late 1920s, by 1930s, by the mid to late 1930s, they were already at war just about everywhere. They decided to try to hit the U.S. in 1941, late 1941, to hold them back so that they could carry on with their mess. But in any case, the Soviets were able to beat up on the Japanese before and during World War II, and that stopped. And that's one of the things that happened. Kutuzov had an army in the east, and when the Germans almost got to Moscow, Kutuzov brought his armies back from the east. They were fully prepared winter fighters, and they had experience fighting the Japanese. And he counterattacked the Germans, and they never did recover from it, even though the war carried on for a couple years more.
And the whole point about it is that actually China, they weren't officially at war, but Japan and Russia were long-term enemies.
Well, they had the non-aggression pact for a long time. But anyway, that's a long story, and I can't really get into it. I can sort out I know all the details there, but it would take me a long time to actually describe what happened in 1940 politics. Basically, the Japanese did a non-aggression pact with the Soviets and the Germans. Each one or the other did not know that the Japanese had a non-aggression pact with those two potential enemies. And Randy West says the Western economy dove all into Russia after the fall of the wall, with everything from McDonald's to Levi's investing to help grow a new Russian market. But they didn't do it well enough. And the other part of it, Russia wasn't prepared for it. The oligarchs took over. And you had a guy like Yeltsin who just kind of took over from Gorbachev, and he didn't really know what he was doing, and he was drunk all the time, and so he put Putin in control, and Putin tried the democracy thing for a while. It didn't really work, and because they had powerful oligarchs, and if you have powerful oligarchs, you don't have a good democracy, like in the Ukraine that has a lot of powerful oligarchs.
Yeah.
In any case, I think probably today's show's over, and
absolutely.
And we would like to congratulate the Florida Panthers. We also looking forward to a peace deal if we can get one in the Middle East, and it looks as if there are embryonic peace deals afloat in Ukraine. And those, I don't know how much they're going to happen in Gaza, but I do expect that there will be
hesitant about any of them. About any of them,
I don't think the Ukraine one will come anytime soon, but this is the beginning of the end, basically. This is the end of the beginning, basically, of a peace deal, because peace deals are now being proposed by the UN and the EU and Turkey and Russia. Russia's got one that seems to be the one that's going to end. It's going to be, what's going to happen is they're going to stop fighting like they did in Korea, and they're going to have a demilitarized zone. And North Korea is going to, like North Korea claims South Korea and South Korea claims North Korea. It's gonna be like that. For good. I'm afraid that's gonna be the way it is for 100 years, and that will teach. Unfortunately, that will teach everybody a bad lesson. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons with guarantees from Russia and the United States that their territorial integrity will remain the same. So they did that. They did the world a favor. They got rid of their nuclear weapons. Now, guess what happened?
Yeah,
Russia's invaded, and the U.S. could not guarantee their integrity, nor could the Russians. And everybody's making lots and lots of money off of the war machine.
Yep. All right. That's basically it. And Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you pray for peace. Thanks, everyone.